Welcome back to the Rags to Races podcast. I'm your host, Jake, and we're going to take a little break from autocross this week. I wanted to talk about the SCCA Majors this week, as this past weekend and last week were the SCCA runoffs, which is basically the championship, the national championship for SCCA amateur racing. The cream of the crop, the best of the best. This week I have a special guest, the man I crew for. I also consider my motorsports road racing mentor, Rich Walke, came by to give me and Brooks an interview and to talk about his history and his long-standing history with the SCCA and road racing in general. So without further ado, here's the interview with Rich. All right, welcome back to the Rags to Races podcast. I'm your host, Jake, and I'm here with Brooks again.
Hey, what's up?
And we're going to take a little step aside from autocross for now. We're actually going to talk about the big leagues here, wheel-to-wheel racing, more specifically the SCCA Sports Car Club of America Majors. I'm here with my guy. You've probably heard me talk about him before. His name is Rich Walke, and he races in the STL class with the SCCA Majors. Say hi, Rich.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone.
So tell us a little about yourself, Rich. Let's hear about your racing history.
Okay, well, I'm a long-time racer. I've been involved with this sport now for 41 seasons. I got involved in racing right after I got out of college. In other words, about the time I finally had enough money to pursue this, I jumped in both feet and have never backed off since then. I've been racing continuously 41 seasons. And there's a few other people who have raced that long, certainly. But for the most part, people who race that long, they take a sabbatical at some point in time when their kids are growing up and things like that, and then ultimately get back into it once the kids are grown. The unique thing about me is I've been doing this continually for 41 seasons and enjoyed every one of them.
Wow, 41. You've been racing longer than I've been alive. Not to make you feel old or anything.
People have told me that before, yes. Kind of frightening.
So what exactly got you into racing? Where did you get the idea to start racing?
Well, I actually first, I'll say, got the racing bug back when I was in junior high. I was living in Omaha, Nebraska at the time, and my brothers and I got on our bikes one afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and just took a ride around the town, and we happened to run across a shopping center, and in the parking lot there were a number of sporty-type cars racing around pylons. Now I know that's autocrossing. At the time, I had no idea what that really was, but we were just infatuated with these cars, and back in those days, it was primarily British sports cars, MGs, Triumphs, and that sort of thing. But what still sticks out in my mind was there was an AC Cobra, original. Of course, it was original back in those days, because that was in the 60s. It was an original 427 AC Cobra. Oh. He was running that at the autocross. There were a number of Corvettes, so it was interesting to watch those big cars around these pylons. So that really got me enthused with racing. But, as a junior high kid, what can you do with that interest at that point in time? That was prior to the days of televised racing even. Every once in a while we'd see the Indy 500 on TV or maybe the Daytona 500, but that was about it. No 24/7 racing channel. So I guess my interest sort of stagnated because there was no way to pursue it. And then when I moved to Chicago in my high school years with my family, my dad started taking us to the Indy 500 and then to MIS to watch both the IndyCar races and the stock cars. And we went to Milwaukee a few times, and that's where, again, I renewed my interest in racing and thought, wow, someday I would just love to do this. But again, as a high school kid, where do you go from there? And a high school kid with no money, and kind of sat in the background. And then when I got into college, I guess it would be my junior year in college, I bought an old Austin Healey Sprite. And, man, I was in the big time. Now I had a real British roadster, British sports car, and bought it from Continental Motors, John Weinberger's dealership, and paid $600 for it. And that's what really got me kind of motivated to pursue this, to take it to the next level. And I started learning about autocrossing at that point in time. And okay, here's an opportunity for me to not road race, of course, but at least to get out on parking lot type environment and run this car as fast as I could. So I started doing autocrossing and actually was very, very good at it and won a number of races in this old Austin Healey that I had spent $600 on. So it just sort of expanded from there.
Wow. So actually, it's kind of funny, Austin Healey Sprite. I have a little history with one of those. The first SCCA race I ever went to, one of my babysitters at the time, this is around 1989, 1990-ish. Her father drove a Frog Eye Sprite in the SCCA, and I went up to Blackhawk Farms to watch him race. Unfortunately, he was there. It was a qualifying day. He lost control in the carousel right in front of me and went headfirst into a concrete block that was about 6 cubic feet.
Ouch.
And you know how small that car is, Rich.
Yes.
The guy was 6'6".
Wow.
He had to get airlifted out. He banged up his knee pretty good. The car was a complete total loss, but somehow, for some reason, in my twisted, warped head, I still wanted to do this for some reason. After watching somebody I know crash and get carried off in a helicopter, something stuck with me. I was a little nervous about it for a while, but it's one of those things. Once you get behind the wheel, like you were saying, even in an autocross platform, once that bug bites you, you're pretty much hooked for life.
Yeah, that's it. It is hard to escape this business. I have a decal on my race car on each side reading, racing is a life sentence with no chance of parole. And that is the truth.
It is.
Usually when one retires, it's because you're forced to retire. It's for some reason, health reasons, work reasons, family reasons, or whatever. And most people don't do it voluntarily.
Well, I knew a guy down in Texas. He drove sprint cars and did dirt track stuff. And he actually was a very good shrimper. He had his own shrimp boat and made a really good living off it. He finally retires, decides to go race car driving. 3 years after that, he got another job as a crane operator just so he could continue race car driving. So you do wheel-to-wheel racing. Can you describe a little bit more about what it is you do and what the SCCA Majors are?
Okay, the SCCA Majors is really the top echelon of SCCA amateur road racing. We call it amateur road racing because technically we don't get prize money. We certainly get contingency sponsorship money from the various manufacturers, which in my case is really what makes all this possible. Without that help, I would not be involved in this any longer. In any case, again, it's the top echelon of SCCA road racing, amateur road racing. And SCCA divides the country up into 5 geographical conferences. We happen to be in the Northern Conference. And the idea is we race within our own conference all year long. And then at the end of the year, they take the top cars from each of the conferences, and we go to a one-race shootout called the SCCA Runoffs. This year it happens to be at Mid-Ohio. Last year it was down at Daytona International Speedway. So anyway, we go to the runoffs, and we have one big race, one big shootout, and ultimately one driver is crowned the national champion of that particular class. So we've been fortunate enough over the years to qualify for the runoffs, and we've had some good years at the runoffs. We've had some not so good years at the runoffs, and that's always normal. I guess the highlight of my runoff career is a third-place finish in the 2012 runoffs up at Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. Certainly was a thrill to be on the podium and go through the whole interview process and spraying champagne and so on. So that's really I guess I'll say the highlight of my racing career at the runoffs. We've had some 6th place finishes over the years, also several of those. Last year I was fortunate enough to finish 6th at Daytona. Somewhat of an eventful race. I had qualified middle of the field, I believe it was 16th, and we were late to the grid for a variety of reasons and ultimately ended up being put to the back of the pack, started in 37th position and made it up to 6th place by the end of the race. That was quite the thrill.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make it there with you, but I was definitely watching online, and that was a white and red rocket I was watching going through those bank corners. How fast exactly did you go on the straight?
Yeah, we had the fastest trap speed at Daytona within the STL class at 152.179 miles an hour, basically at the start-finish line, which really isn't even the top speed. We actually continue foot flat in the floor for short distance after that start-finish, so we were probably even a couple miles an hour faster than that. But I run a Mazda RX-7, the second-gen 1987 chassis, and that car is just so aerodynamic. It was just absolutely the perfect car to have at Daytona. I won't say we had the most horsepower. I won't say we had the most torque through the infield, but once that car got over 100 miles an hour, it was just a rocket, and it was far superior in terms of aerodynamics than most of the other cars in the class. And I'll say also we focused on the aerodynamics leading up to that race. We spent basically 2 months working on our aero package of that car, and then spent the whole week fine-tuning the wing package to get to that point. I'll say I'm not sure if the final suspension wing package was the best choice in terms of lap times, but it certainly was the best choice in terms of top speed. But unfortunately, you have a limited number of practice sessions in which to test and tune and figure out what that optimum setting was. So we went with a package of low drag, low downforce, and it seemed to work out.
Well, that's completely awesome. And I had actually posted something on my Instagram here about you. You got a little package in the mail from the SCCA not too long ago.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I got my Northern Conference STL Championship trophy in the mail about a week and a half or so ago. So I'm very proud of that. We've actually won, between the divisional and majors championships, we've won the STL championship now for the last 5 seasons. And prior to that, we ran the same car in the Improved Touring S, or ITS class, in regional competition. We had 7 championships in 9 years running regional. So we've been quite successful in winning championships.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got a question for you, though. Being a noob as I am, you guys have mentioned the STL class a few times now. What is that exactly?
The STL class is a relatively new class in SCCA. It stands for Super Touring Light. And basically what it is, it's an engine-concentric class, which basically means you pick your engine, you put that engine in any chassis produced by the same manufacturer. So for my Mazda RX-7, I can use any engine that Mazda builds, and in my car I happen to use the original rotary engine in my RX-7, but in theory I could use any Mazda motor, or for that matter any other Mazda racer, for example a Miata, could use the rotary engine in their car. Anyway, so it sort of centers around the engine, and then from there you build a chassis around it. And the chassis, you're permitted limited modifications to the chassis. You can change springs, shocks, sway bars, increase the tire size, put bigger brakes in the car. You're not allowed to change pickup points and adjust the true geometry of the suspension on the car. And then of course the car is gutted. You are required to run the original bodywork, so no flared fenders. You're limited on wheel sizes, so that thereby limits your tire size. So from the outside, the car looks relatively stock in appearance, but underneath there are a lot of subtle modifications to the car. And of course, SCCA is very safety orientated, so the car has full roll cage in it, fire system, seat belts, and all the necessary safety equipment.
Great.
What do you think when it comes to wheel-to-wheel racing? What's your favorite part about it? What's the one thing that really keeps you going back for more racing?
Of course, the favorite part is winning. And we've been fortunate enough over the years, I would say, in the past, I'll say 15 years, we've won roughly 50% of the races that we've entered. And,
wow.
And that's what keeps you coming back. It's the success stories and doing well and optimizing what you have and doing well as a driver also is important. Beyond that, it's a thrill of competition, the adrenaline, and I'm, I guess by nature, a competitive person, and maybe I found something that I'm relatively good at, so I try to exploit that and try to win as frequently as possible, and But, like everything in life, racing is a compromise. I mean, as I say, I like to win. We all have limited budgets. Some budgets are a little less limited than others. Mine is very, very limited. So, sometimes it's hard to find that right balance between wanting to go fast and winning versus, realistically, what can you spend from the family budget on this hobby.
Okay, kind of an offshoot of your answer there. Just lost my train of thought, so that's going to get edited out.
Well, that's kind of what this whole show's about, though, showing that no matter what kind of budget you have, if you've got an interest in racing, you can make it happen as long as you've got the drive and the determination to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, with SCCA Majors Racing, you can spend, realistically, probably as little as $10,000 per season in some classes, and you can spend $200,000 to $300,000 quite easily in other classes if you have that sort of budget available to you. So it's a matter of finding the right class for your interest, but also for your budget.
Something I'm thinking about here, and it's something Brooks had brought up in one of our previous episodes. He's not really a gearhead, concentric, techie type person when it comes to cars. Now, I know you work on your car. I help you work on your car as much as I can. Is there an area where someone could get involved with the SCCA Majors or in wheel-to-wheel racing with the SCCA in general, but not really know how to work on a car? Is there still an area where they can get involved with it and be able to do it?
I suppose there's a number of ways of getting involved in majors racing, and certainly if you don't have the budget to drive and own a car, there's certainly a lot of opportunities with SCCA to volunteer your time and work at the events and stay involved in that way. And a number of people do that. From the perspective of being involved with a team, there's probably any number of teams that would be willing to let you tag along and learn at their expense, shall we say, and help in whatever way that you can, even though you're not truly mechanically inclined. Most teams would be more than willing to teach you along the way and ultimately build up your abilities to the point where you could be a viable member of that team at some point in time. From the driving perspective, there's also opportunities to participate as a driver without having to lift a hand to do anything associated with the cars. And I always give my little explanation. I consider myself a dinosaur in this business nowadays. Back when I started racing in 1976, most everyone involved built their own race cars. They maintained their own race cars. They towed them to the track on an open trailer behind a family station wagon or family van or pickup truck, and unloaded it and worked on it all weekend, drove the car, loaded it back up, took it home, and then spent the next few weeks in the garage rebuilding, repairing whatever was necessary, maintaining it, and then doing it all over again. And that was just the way it was. And nowadays, though, there's a good number of prep shops that will actually build, maintain, tow, and crew for your effort during the weekend. So you don't have to be mechanically inclined. You just need to have a bank account capable of supporting that sort of effort. And that's not an inexpensive way to go racing by any stretch of the imagination. But it is there for those people who either don't have the mechanical abilities, don't have the time, don't have the location, shop, or whatever to do it themselves. And nowadays, I'd say those folks outnumber us dinosaurs. And it's great that there is that ability for people of all walks of life to get involved in the sport.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a pretty good deal, but I'm sure it comes with quite a hefty price tag to do something like that.
Yes, it does. Absolutely, it does. And unfortunately, my price tag or my budget doesn't permit that sort of thing. So I'm still the dinosaur. I do just about everything on my car myself. The only thing I don't do is build the motors. Fortunately, Speed Source takes care of that for me. And fortunately, with the RX-7, you don't need to rebuild the motors very often. My last motor, I went 8 seasons on between rebuilds. This one's now got 3 seasons. This one, it's the same motor, just was rebuilt by Speed Source. But it's got 3 seasons, and it's still going strong as the day I I got it back from Speed Source. So that's the fortunate thing. So they take care of that. I do everything else in the car, transmissions, differentials. Every once in a while, if car gets banged up to the point where it needs to be pulled out on a frame machine, I do take that to the body shop. I typically will do all the heavy lifting, strip it all down, bring them the shell, let them pull it out, and then bring it back home, do the bondoing, painting, and all that myself also. So that's the most economical way of racing, and then I guess in my situation, that's what I have to do. I don't have other options.
Do you feel that maybe it gives you an advantage too, if you know your car a little bit better than maybe somebody who doesn't work on it on their own car? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that does give you an advantage. When problems do arise is when it really gives you an advantage, because you can, as you're driving, kind of think about what's going on with the car, what could be the issue, and is this a serious issue, or should I just drive through it and keep on going, and what's the financial ramifications of it? You do keep driving. Am I going to destroy the motor, the transmission, differential, or is it something minor that won't have any major catastrophic events as a result of it? So yes, it definitely gives you an advantage. But I will also say doing my own body work is a distinct disadvantage, because when I hit something or hit somebody, or somebody hits me, I'm going to be the one in the garage with my head in the cloud of Bondo for the next 3 weeks repairing that car, whereas other folks who just drop it off at the local body shop and say fix it, it's a little different situation.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that you get those little love taps or dents on the side of your car from a Corvette that you had to get around. I'm sure that hurts that much more, knowing that you've got to go home and repair that.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly does. And I guess I'll have to say, over the years, I've had some incidents that it was my own fault. I've instigated them, and there's been others that have been instigated by others, and the ones instigated by others hurt worse. You made your own mistake, you say, well, I pay the consequences, my own fault. That's part of racing.
Absolutely. Tell the listeners about what an average race weekend's like for you.
Average race weekend is a lot of effort, and the way I do it. It usually starts about Thursday at noon, maybe even Thursday morning. I usually take Thursday and Friday off of work, and fortunately I've worked for the same company a number of years and have enough vacation days that I can do that. So I take Thursday and Friday off work. I snag the trailer from the storage yard, snag the motorhome from the storage yard, bring it all home, load everything up, and then we'll head to the track typically on somewhere Friday morning-ish, usually get to the track Friday afternoon, and then the work once again begins. I'll load the car, set up the pit area, the canopies, and get all the tools laid out and ready to go. For SCCA Majors, other than the June Sprints, which is a 3-day event, the race weekend starts on Saturday morning. Typically, the SCCA Majors has one qualifying session first thing on Saturday morning, and then the race on Saturday afternoon, a second qualifying on Sunday morning, and then the second race on Sunday afternoon. So that's kind of the beauty of the Majors formats, is you do get 2 races in on a given weekend. Back in the old days, when I first started racing, was doing regionals and council races. It was typically one race weekend, or one race per weekend, and that was great. It was fun, but having 2 separate race events, it kind of adds to the experience. You get the adrenaline rush of 2 different starts, and also the opportunity to make good if you don't do well on Saturday. Another chance to do it again on Sunday. So it adds to the enjoyment of their overall weekend. So, but the weekend is a lot of work. There's a lot of preparation if you want to do it right. There's a lot of maintenance on the car between sessions if you want to do it right. And I'm very, very meticulous on the maintenance of my car, which is why I have such a good finishing record. So we, after each session, typically we'll pull the wheels off, but bleed the brakes, check, make sure everything's still tight and okay underneath the car. Download the data from the data acquisition system. Of course, fuel it, check all the fluids, check the engine bolts, make sure everything's still tight again, and make sure that we're confident the car's going to finish the race then that afternoon. And after the race on Saturday, we do it all over again, get ready for Sunday morning's qualifying. After the qualifying session Sunday morning, we do it all over again for the race on Sunday afternoon. We've been, as I said before, fortunate enough to win quite a few races, and the SCCA does a reasonable job of policing the effort. After a race, if you finish in the top 3, your car is impounded. They'll weigh it. They'll take some measurements, check a few things here and there, and generally try to make sure that you're playing by the rules. And it'll take typically 45 minutes after the race, and then from there we load up and we head on home.
And just a little bit of to clear things up, if you're not familiar with what he means by impounding the car, he basically, you go to an area, you park the car, and you can't touch it, you can't move for a designated amount of time in case anyone wants to contest or try and say you're cheating. That way the officials can come over and look the car over more in depth to make sure you're not doing anything that's breaking the rules of the class. What's a good story, one of your favorite stories from your many years of racing here?
Oh, good question. I'm trying to think of the best story or an interesting story. Well, I guess I'll say one interesting story. Let's go back many, many years ago, 1990. We had just got the same RX-7 that I'm racing now. And the intent was at that point in time, we were running the IMSA Firehawk Series, which is a semi-pro series sponsored by IMSA. It was a support race for the big IMSA GTP cars. For various reasons, 1990 didn't get off to a good start with the Firehawk Series, so we backed off and said, okay, let's just skip this year and do some club racing. So we decided to take the car out to Nelson Ledges, and at the time they were running what was called the longest day, or was the longest night. It was a 24-hour endurance race of basically showroom stock and IT cars. So it was the original of the 24-hour endurance races from SCCA. So we decided we were going to go out and do that race. We had done it one other time when it was part of the SCCA showroom stock escort series, but it had fallen off the schedule of the escort series by 1990. So it just became basically a standalone endurance event. So we took the RX-7 out there, and we'd been having some engine problems leading up to that race. So I went out there on Thursday, actually, and did a test day on Thursday to make sure we had resolved our engine problems, and we had. So then Friday morning's practice session started, and there were 3 of us driving, myself, Scott Livingston, and another gentleman, having a senior moment. His name escapes me, but he was from St. Louis. He was a good friend of Scott's. And so anyway, the 3 of us were going to be co-driving this 24-hour race. So the first official practice session started, and this gentleman, who I can't think of his name, and he's still racing to this day, he went out and on about the second lap of the first session, put the car in a tire wall, in a carousel, and the car rode up over the top of the tire wall and ended up with the front of the car on top of the tire wall, the back of the car open to traffic, and he had gone in with the left side originally, so he took out the left side of the car and the front of the car.
Wow.
So there was this, again, the second lap of the session, so the workers decided just to leave the car for the session, and lo and behold, somebody else made the exact same mistake ended up plowing into the back of our car as it was sitting there parked on top of the guardrail. So they dragged this car back, and by now, of course, the rear end was caved in, the left side was caved in, the front was caved in. So we went to work repairing this car, and we couldn't make the second afternoon session because the car wasn't drivable at that point in time. And we had a couple of guys coming from Chicago on Friday night, so we told them, bring torches, bring some exhaust pipes, because it had rammed the exhaust pipe forward and destroyed the exhaust system. So we worked all Friday repairing the car, worked late into the evening. These other people showed up at midnight Friday night, and we started working again first thing in the morning on Saturday morning, fabricating an exhaust system for the car. And we basically finished up with probably about 3 minutes to go before the last qualifying session on Saturday morning. And the race was destined to start, or planned to be started at about 3 in the afternoon, if I remember right, on Saturday afternoon, and run until 3 in the afternoon on Sunday afternoon. So we qualified, qualified basically mid-pack. We hadn't finished everything on the car, hadn't gotten alignment done and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So we weren't putting forth our best effort, of course, at that point. Not to mention, of course, the aero was probably not quite right either at that point with the wrinkled bodywork. But we did take the fenders off and pound the fender out, I guess it was, and a few other things to put forward our best effort we could. So anyway, we started the race, and we were running the ITE class at the time, which basically was a class for cars that ran in either the IMSA Firehawk series or the SCCA Showroom Stock Endurance series. So anyway, we kept moving up during the course of the race and moving up the field and moving up the ranks, and the car was running very well. And we did get hit in the middle of the night, took out the only remaining side of the car that had not been damaged prior to that. So we kept moving up, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, we started thinking, we could win this thing. We could win this thing overall, even. About that point, we were running 3rd overall and closing on the overall leaders of the field. The car was running good, running strong, so we just kept plugging along, and we tried to pick up the pace so that we could take an overall victory. Somewhere around, I'm going to say around 11 a.m. on Sunday morning, maybe noonish, a few hours before the end of the race, all of a sudden the handling went off on the car. And as we were coming out of the slower turns, we were lifting the inside wheel, spinning the inside wheel, I should say. So I guess our assumption was that we had lost the limited slip in the car. It was allowing the inside rear wheel to spin. So we obviously knew we couldn't do anything about that, so we just figured we're going to plug along and do as best we can. And as a result of that, we were not able to take an overall victory, but we were in first place in ITE, and we maintained that first place position till the end of the race. And kind of the interesting thing about endurance racing, and you see this on TV with Daytona, Le Mans, and so on, is that near the end of the race, all the teammates want to line up so they get a photo finish coming underneath the flag together. So as a result of that, you have cars running at all sorts of different speeds.
Geez.
And we were still racing for our class lead. Our class leader was only about maybe 10 seconds. I'm not the class leader, the second place in class was only about maybe 10 seconds behind us. So we had to keep the pace up so that we didn't get past, and yet we had all these cars that were lining up for their photo finish blocking us, and it was really a hair-raising last few laps to try to make it to the end and maintain the lead without further damaging the car running into one of these cars who were lining up for their photo event. So anyway, we were able to keep the lead, and we did take the win, and that was quite the thrill. In particular, it was quite the thrill because of all the adversity that we had faced and the work that we had done all weekend long to keep the car running, and so I guess that was at that point in my racing career the highlight, the biggest win that we had. Now the downside of that is that we had worked most of the night, Friday night, Saturday night, or Saturday morning on the car. So we probably got 3 hours worth of sleep at that point in time, and then we raced all Saturday night, and I was able to grab a few hours of sleep in the motorhome during the course of that evening. But then Sunday night after the race, we had to load up and get home. Now, you could say, well, shit, just slept in the motorhome and gone home Monday morning. Well, out of my own stupidity, I planned a business meeting at 8 a.m. on Monday morning.
Shut up.
Not a smart thing to do in retrospect. So I had to get home, and I was driving the motorhome home alone. Everyone else flew home. So I was driving it home alone, and I was so exhausted that I could just do maybe an hour before I started getting too sleepy to drive. So I'd pull over to the side of the road or pull over in a rest stop, take a 20 or 30 minute rest, and then get back on the road. And I finally got home about 6 a.m. on Monday morning, just in time to take a shower and head to work and go to that meeting. I was probably sound asleep in that meeting anyway, so I learned my lesson on that one. Never schedule a meeting on Monday morning after a race weekend.
Wow. Well, they say, I've heard many people say the most excruciating and grueling thing you could possibly do in motorsports is an endurance race, which explains why I'm such a glutton for punishment, and that's actually what I'm getting out there and trying to do. But
yeah, we were fortunate enough to run both the SCCA Showroom Stock Endurance Series. They called it the Escort Series, which later evolved into what's now the World Challenge. We also ran the IMSA Firehawk Series, which later evolved into now the Continental Tire Series. And so we ran those events, and in those days, those were endurance events, and we've run probably 8, 10, 24-hour races, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. It's a real accomplishment to finish one of those races, to keep a car running for that whole period of time. So that was, I guess also some highlights of my racing career is to be able to run that series we did it from 86 through 91.
Wow. Would you ever do the 25 hours of Thunderhill now?
Yeah, I would. Absolutely. I absolutely would. Geographically, doesn't make much sense for us here in Chicago to do that. But, if I ever had the chance to participate in endurance racing, absolutely. In whatever capacity, crewing, driving, whatever, certainly would take that opportunity.
Well, if I get the Miata together and it'll hold through a Lemons race, maybe we'll have to make a go at it.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good.
What's a good way for someone to get started into motorsports if they're on a limited budget?
Well, if you're on a limited budget, it really means you're going to be doing most of the work yourself. You need to develop some expertise, you need to have some knowledge, and you need to make some smart decisions on what type of car that you want to race. I always tell people, if you're first getting into racing, and I'll say regardless of your budget, but when you're first getting into racing, go to the track and talk to the people who are racing the type of cars you think you might be interested in. Talk to them about the amount of maintenance that car requires, the budget it requires to run, and some of the tips and prep work that you need to do, and learn as much as you can about it. And I'll say 90% of the people, maybe more of the people at the track, will be more than willing to mentor somebody getting into racing and help them get into racing. And so that's the best way of getting into it is. And once you've kind of zeroed in on what type of car you want to race, then again, talk to the people who are racing that type of car. But beyond that, don't do as I've always done. Don't build your own car. Buy a car that's already built, and buy the best possible car that your budget will permit. Because when you're buying a used race car, you're basically buying it for 10 cents on the dollar, roughly. So buy the best car you can possibly find, and then don't play with it. Don't change it. Obviously, that if you buy a successful car, it's a successful car certainly because of the driver who previously owned it, but also it's because the driver did a good job in prepping the car. Drive it the way it is. Don't think you know more than that team that had been running that car for many years. Drive it the way it is. Learn it, and after a few years' experience, then perhaps it's time to start making some additional changes and tweaks on that car as time and budget permits. But that's certainly the most economical way of getting involved in racing. And plan on doing most of that work yourself. And certainly it would be nice to have a big fancy motorhome and a big fancy trailer to haul the car, but you don't need that. That doesn't make you go faster. Just makes the weekend a little more comfortable, shall we say, and then the trip to the track a little more comfortable. So I'll say, if you're on a limited budget, don't think you need the fanciest tow rig. And I still, to this day, tow on an open trailer, an old motorhome. And as long as it's reliable, we'll get you to the track. That's the important thing.
Yeah, and to add to that a little bit, pretty much any track I've been to, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, they've got shower facilities there. So if you bring the pickup truck and with a bench seat, you sleep on the bench seat or throw a sleeping bag in the bed with an air mattress, you still got a place to clean up and shower in the morning before the racing starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Every track has those sort of facilities, and bring a small grill. You can cook out at the track if you don't want to spend the money to go into a restaurant. So there's lots of ways to save money on the travel end of things.
Now, for someone that really wants to get into this, let's say that it's like you got two guys who are friends. They both want to get involved in it. Would it be viable to have one car between the two and maybe go to different races just to save costs, just to get, even just to get the experience in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I did for a number of years. I shared several MG midgets and Austin Healey's with Mike Hart and Mike Hemstock over the years, and there was a period of time where Mike Hart was running in SCCA Nationals, I was running the car in SCCA Regionals, and Mike Hemstock was running the car in Midwestern Council. So it was a lot of work. We were typically running about, there was a period for 3 years, about 17, 18 weekends a year.
Wow.
So obviously that was before I was married and had kids, of course. But because it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun because we'd all get together, Monday night after the race weekend, unload, start doing the prep for the car for the next weekend, and we all chipped in and pulled our own weight on the prep side of things. So, yeah, that certainly represents a viable approach. One thing you need to be careful about, though, when you start sharing cars is make sure you have a clear-cut agreement on how you're going to pay for the repairs of the car. Who's footing the bill if the car gets banged up, broken, bent, blows a motor, or whatever the case may be. And, I've never had any sort of legal agreement with the two Mikes on any of our events, but basically we just agreed to share the cost. And when we were running the endurance races, we were typically 3 to 4 drivers on a 24-hour race and 2 or 3 on the shorter races. And what worked for us is we just said, okay, whatever the cost of running that particular race weekend is, we're going to divide it by the drivers. And the drivers paid for the crew's expenses. We didn't pay a salary for the crew, but we paid all of their expenses. Everything that they spent over the weekend, we would reimburse them. And that was all part of the expenses, and we would just split it between the drivers. And that made it a lot more palatable when the car did get bent, because one person, the person driving it at the time it got bent, whether it was their fault or not, didn't become responsible for that full cost of repairing the damage, I should say. So we just split the cost. And so, how any individual team or friends do that, it's up to them, but have a clear-cut agreement. Handshake deal is all we ever did. And for us, it worked out very well.
For someone who's first getting involved, what are some of the biggest costs up front to get started in the SCCA?
I suppose it depends on how one does it. If you think you need the fanciest tow rig, that's going to be the biggest single expense. If you can get by with an older vehicle, motorhome, pickup truck, or use your family SUV or van or whatever, then that may not be an expense whatsoever. But assuming once you have most of the basic equipment, tow vehicle, trailers, and the car on a per race weekend basis, tires and entry fee are your single biggest expenses. I happen to run the Hoosier R and A7 tires, R being the road race tires, A being the autocross tires, depending on the track we're going to, the temperature conditions. We sometimes run autocross, sometimes we'll run the race tires, but they will become the single biggest expenses. And typically those tires will go roughly 4 to 6 sessions, track sessions. Certainly there's lots of tread left on them after that, so if you're like me, you don't have the budget to put tires on every 4, 5, 6 sessions, then you keep running them. But the fast guys will be putting on tires every 4 or 5 sessions, which really means almost a full set of tires per weekend at roughly $1,200 mounted and balanced for those tires. So that's, to me, the single biggest expenses. Entry fee will run about $500 for the event, and then depending on where you're going and how many miles you're towing, and what mileage your vehicle gets. Mine gets about 6 miles a gallon, so gas to the track actually is more expensive than gas for the race car during the weekend. So that's also a big expense. And, I guess I'm speaking from the perspective of the RX-7. Those are the biggest expenses. We don't break many parts. We don't use many brakes. We'll use 2 sets of pads over the course of a season, typically at $150 a set, so a pair, I should say. So that's relatively incidental. So, but anyway, those are the biggest expense items. And then again, depending on how you do it, if you have a prep shop doing your work, then it's going to be quite a bit more pricey. If you want to take your crew out for a fancy steak dinner on Saturday night, well, that's going to set you back a few dollars also, depending on the size of your crew. And so whatever it costs, though, I'll say for the crew, they're well worth it.
Maybe we should start talking about dinners after races here when we get off the air.
We have to renegotiate our
You're
deal.
the one that brought the steak dinners up. That's all I'm going to say. When we're at the track, and I've noticed, not only working with you, but when I've worked with other race teams in the past, even your direct competition, when you're off the track, if they need help, that we see you seem to help people out. Do you see that as a fairly normal thing, or is that sort of an exception to the normal? Everyone keeps to themselves, or is it really as friendly as I'm used to seeing it?
Yeah, it absolutely is friendly. It's a big family type event or a family atmosphere at the track with SCCA Racing. I will say it's not quite as as family oriented as it was perhaps when I was first getting started. Back when I was getting started in racing, we all towed our own cars on a open trailer with our family station wagon or van or whatever. So we didn't have room to carry a lot of spares. So when somebody needed a spare, you would walk around to your competitors and say, hey, do you have a rebuild kit for the front calipers of an Austin Healey Sprite? Do you have this, that, whatever? And everyone was willing to share. Absolutely everyone would give you whatever part they have. And it's still that way today. I loan quite a few parts to people over the course of a season, and we're still willing to do that. But the difference is now people are towing to the track with their big fancy tow vehicles and closed trailers, so they're carrying most all the spares they need to begin with. So the need for borrowing parts is not quite as great as it was back in the early days. But I have loaned transmissions, I've loaned differentials to people over the years, lots of smaller parts, of course, with shared tires, loan tires to people if they brake pads, you name it, clutches, whatever people need, whatever I have, they're more than welcome to borrow it. To be happy to let them borrow it. Now, I was at Gingerman this year and having a couple beers with the Huffmasters, Ray and Rob, along with Charlie Tobel, and known all of those three guys for quite a few years. They run a very good effort out of Detroit area, and Charlie and I were reminiscing about the IT Fest at Mid-Ohio, and I believe it was 2006 or maybe 2007, where he broke a differential, and I loaned him my differential. And during the last race on Sunday, there actually was 3 separate races that counted overall for the victory at the IT Fest.
Wow.
On the last race on Sunday, Charlie started quite a ways behind me, and as the race was progressing, I could see him closing on me, and I kept thinking, my differential is going to beat me. How can that be? But it didn't beat me in the end. I beat Charlie, but he gave me a good fight. But that's the way it is. Yeah, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And we were also reminiscing one year at the Arc that my alternator won the Arc down at Road Atlanta. The Huffmaster showed up for whatever reason. The alternator wasn't working on their RX-7, so they said, do you have a spare? And I said, sure. So I let them use it, and they used it, and they won the race, and I finished third. So their alternator beat me. But that's all right. That's just part of the game. You'd rather loan the person the part, have them on the track, have them give you a good fight, have a good battle with them. Even if you don't end up winning that battle, it's just the way it is. So I think everyone will have the same attitude at SCCA.
In the past, before I've met you, and even long story short, how I ended up working with Rich is I was doing some computer work at one of his relatives' houses, and just got to talking to the lady of the house, who's his sister-in-law. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we were talking, and she said, yeah, well, we moved to this house because of the size of the garage. Well, me being the car guy, I stopped, put down my tools, kind of tilted my head to the side to try and figure out what she's talking about, and started talking about, racing vintage cars and having old vintage British cars. So I broke a conversation out with her. I'm like, listen, I worked on race cars for a good amount of years now. And I was a mechanic before I did this. Do you know anyone that's looking for some help? Well, yeah, my brother-in-law, Rich, he needs somebody to work on his car. So she gave me his number. She called him that night. He called me the next day, and the rest is history. So circumstances like that, they do happen. But before all that, when I was working on dirt track cars and sprint cars, I just started, I was going to some races, and I went with a friend who had more knowledge about the sport than I did and was kind of introducing me to it. But, in between the heats and the races and the main, we'd go down and we'd walk around the paddock, around the different cars, and we'd talk to the drivers who weren't too busy. And eventually that got me working on several different teams' cars. Is that something that would you suggest that if somebody was really interested in getting involved, go to a race and just start striking up conversations with people and possibly leading to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's not a team in a paddock that wouldn't be open to some help at the racetrack or during the week working on the cars. So yes, if anybody's got an interest in learning the sport, learning mechanics, that's a tremendous opportunity, and I've had a number of folks help me over the years. Jake has been helping me for the last few years since we met up. I have a neighbor, Andrew Zizzo, who's been helping me for now since he was, I guess it was a sophomore in high school. He's been helping me, and he's learned a lot as a result of that. And he rebuilt an old Sunbeam Alpine as a result of learning a little more about mechanics, and I did help him a bit on building a motor for it. But in any case, it's a great opportunity for all parties involved, a great learning experience, and a great opportunity for an existing team to have a little more help, because you can never have enough help at the racetrack. There's so much to do, and a lot of responsibility, and driving the car is it's a full-time job. It's a lot of effort, takes a lot of concentration, and if you get in the car exhausted from working on the car, it's difficult to drive your best. So the more help you have at the track, the better off you are. And for the most part, I've been very fortunate over the years. I have some good friends who've been able to help me. I had one crew member, Dan Glitz, who's since passed away, but he helped me for roughly 25 years at the racetrack, and it was a tremendous help over the years. So we need people like that. Every team needs crew members. So if you have an interest, want to get involved, certainly just roam around the paddock, find somebody who's got a car that's interests you, or the other way of looking at it too is find somebody who lives close by, somebody who you can reasonably help in the evenings on the preparation of their car. I'm sure, again, like at the track, they'd be more than willing to let you get involved in their racing effort and help them out. And in some cases, that might mean learning something. In other cases, you may be teaching them, depending on your area of or your level of knowledge. But yes, it's a great opportunity. And realistically, I can't continue driving forever. Sooner or later, I will have to retire. And certainly, I plan to stay involved in the sport in some capacity, working on other folks' race cars, or volunteering for SCCA, working at the track, or some combination thereof.
Outstanding, thank you. So, final question here for you: if you couldn't do SCCA road racing and you could do any other form of motorsport besides SCCA road racing, what would you do?
I've really had an interest in taking up or trying stock car racing. We used to go to Lake Geneva. Well, we still go to Lake Geneva quite frequently, but there used to be a stock car track in Lake Geneva, and they had everything from I think they call them super modified, which were the high dollar, high horsepower cars, to what they call them super stocks, which are basically Monte Carlos with 350 V8s and automatic transmissions. And I always wanted to try that super stock class just to see what it was like. It was a 1/3 mile asphalt track. I just had a real burning desire to give that a try. I still do. If I had ever had the opportunity, I'd jump in one of those in a heartbeat. But it never worked out. I never had the opportunity. So, but maybe someday.
You never know. Maybe we keep going at this. Maybe we'll get somebody to offer us a couple hot laps.
There you go.
So, is there anybody you want to plug, sponsors, where people can find you if they want to get a hold of you, if they got any questions, anything like that?
Yeah, I'll just say that sponsorship is a big part of SCCA racing, and contingency sponsors help the small guys like myself dramatically. I've just put 2 daughters through college, and basically $40,000 a year times 9 years between the two of them. One of them went on and got a master's, so that was an extra year. So do the math. That's a lot of money. And so I didn't have a lot of money to put in racing for about a 7-year time frame. And it was the contingency sponsors that really allowed me to continue racing during those years. Now my youngest daughter graduated this past spring, so now I perhaps have a little bit of more expendable income to play with racing. But the contingency sponsors are tremendous. Hoosier Tire is a fabulous sponsor of SCCA Majors Racing, offering tires as a result of wins. Mazda Motorsports has a contingency program where they pay a debit card, credit card for wins. Hawk Brakes, Summit Racing, those are the primary ones. 5-star racing bodies or plexiglass windows were their end of things. They're involved in it as of 2016. And all those companies have been very good to me, and literally without their assistance, I wouldn't be racing anymore. I would have had to quit back in the college years. So they're great help for all of us, and most of the manufacturers that are involved or sell sporty cars are involved in some way, shape, or form with contingency packages. Some of the oil companies are involved. Brake manufacturers, I use Hawk brakes, so they've been good to me over the years. So, be aware of those programs do exist, and they do pay for performance is really what it boils down to. So I have to thank them for allowing me to continue this during my lean years. And again, I have to thank all the folks who helped me on the race weekends and also between races working on the car. Jake has been a big help the last few years. Andrew Zizzo has been a big help. My father-in-law is always there helping me. Rich Rydell, he's comes to the track every weekend. And it's good to have support like that. Dan Glitch helped me for a number of years. Mike Hart, I mentioned his name earlier. He and I co-owned some MGs and Sprites over the years. He still continues to race in F production in a Turner Ford, and he's a big help. He's got a complete machine shop in his garage. I've got a small machine shop in my garage. He's got a complete machine shop. There's very little that he can't do. So when there's something that exceeds my either talent or equipment, he's always there to lend a helping hand to do whatever I need to do, build whatever I need to do, weld, whatever. So we've been helping each other since 1978 we first met. So we've been helping each other since that long. So it's nice to have friends like that who can help you out. Thinking about getting involved in this sport, try to make friends like that, and it's a two-way street. They help you, you help them, and that's kind of the beauty of it.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. If you guys are out at the any SCCA events next year, be lookout for that white and red number 61 RX-7. Hopefully we'll be at the front of the pack when you see us. Other than that, for Brooks, you want to say anything?
I didn't have a lot to say this episode, but Rich is a great storyteller, and I believe that's the reason why. I just loved hearing all these stories. He's been doing it for so long, and man, I just was hanging on every word. So thanks for being with us here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I always say I do a lot of teaching for my profession, for my job. And I always say, put a mic in front of me. You're not going to get me to shut up.
Lesson learned. Well, in that case, this is Jake and Rich again. Thank you for coming on. Brooks, thanks for coming by again. Just remember, keep the shiny side up, the greasy side down. Remember, there are no strangers in motorsports, only friends you haven't met. Thanks a lot. So there you go, folks. That was Rich Walke, and I'll tell you what, 41 years of experience behind the wheel, turning wrenches, and racing. That kind of knowledge is invaluable, and for what little he shared with us tonight, it was so eye-opening. Even for me, I've been working with a guy for 2 years now, and I learned so much just from that 1 hour of sitting down and talking with him. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please tell a friend about it. Subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. You can also find me on Stitcher, or you can go right through the website at www.ragstoraces.libsyn.com. Please like me on Facebook, www.facebook.com/ragstoraces. I'm on Twitter at ragstoraces, Instagram at rags2races, and you can email me with any questions, comments, or concerns, ragstoraces@gmail.com. I'm also now blogging on Opposite Lock. You can find me there, Rags to Races. And I am building my YouTube channel now, so all the podcasts will be available there very soon, along with some extra videos that I'll be posting from time to time. Again, hope you enjoyed the show. Keep the shiny side up, the greasy side down, and always remember, there are no strangers in motorsport, only friends you haven't met. Thanks.